One, we are live. Welcome to the next episode of DecentMed Spotlight. Today we're here with two providers. The first one is Dr. Kristin Barnes. She is the founder of the Alternative Flight Plan podcast. She's also a veteran. She's a naturopathic doctor, and she has a multimodal approach. The other one is Jim Pehkonen. Jim Pehkonen also has a YouTube channel. It's Amazing Life Design. He helps men that are late teen to early 20s overcome trauma. Because let's be honest, especially in today's time, men really get the short end of the stick. And a lot of men don't really have an outlet to portray their trauma. A lot of men are afraid to talk about it. We live in a world in which people tell men, especially young men, to just shut up and deal with it. So someone like Jim is very, very valuable for young men. Jim and Dr. Barnes, thank you for being here today. You guys want to introduce yourself more?
Sure, I'll start. Dr. Kristin Barnes. I am out on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State. I had a 23-year career in the Navy flying aircraft off of aircraft carriers. Ended up going to medical school after I retired because I was looking for something that would fill my soul instead of just fill my bank account. And so I ended up in Seattle going to school, and that's how I ended up staying here. A lot of my work is focused around veterans and helping veterans come back to vitality from trauma. And that's a lot to unpack just right there. So most of that work I do is my volunteer work. I'm involved with a couple of nonprofits that help provide grants to veterans for counter-strain therapy. We'll get into that. And psychedelic assisted therapy. And then in my daily life, working in Port Townsend with the community here, I am basically a generalist, and I focus on anything that might be contributing to chronic pain. So that's me in a nutshell.
Perfect. Let me introduce myself, but first let me say, Dr. Barnes, thank you for your service. And I love what you said. Thank you for picking something that is filling your heart and soul, not just your pocketbook. My name is Jim Pehkonen. I'm a life architect. In December, I will have been doing this 20 years. I started out in addiction recovery. I spent 12 to 14 years working in addiction recovery facilities, then went on to assisting businesses where oftentimes I would work with the owners and their spouses. And then I started working with their young people. So right now my focus is on young men from their mid to late teens to their late 20s to get them to not only understand how they create this experience called life, but to process whatever traumas they have. And as one mother explained it to me in a referral she gave me, in working together, her son received the wisdom of his grandfather while he was in his late 20s. So, and DecentMed, thank you for having me on. Oh, we cannot hear you, fine sir.
Something that Dr. Barnes said that was very interesting was she brought up the word vitality. Both Dr. Barnes and Jim will be speaking at our summit on 12/12 and 12/13, the DecentMed Summit. And one element, or the major element of that summit, is experience vitality. So can you guys both speak on what is vitality to you? And we'll start with you, Dr. Barnes.
I think from my own lived experience, vitality is having the ability to get the most out of life, whatever that might be. And maybe you can describe vitality as what it's not. It's not having enough energy. It's not sleeping well. It's not having the right relationships. It's anything that kind of not living from a place of vitality is coming from a place that is, draining your soul. And so that's a multimodal approach, especially from a naturopathic perspective. That vitality and obtaining vitality, achieving vitality comes from good nutrition and good sleep and good mental health. And that's a step-by-step process, because I think most of us have been raised in a way that is not sustainable, meaning we have poor diets or we have poor sleep, and eventually that shit catches up with us, right? So I think what I do in my work here is start chipping away at things over time for people so that they're digestible. So you may not get to vitality right away, but at least you start working towards something that makes concrete strides to getting you feeling better, so you can go out and do the things that you want to do, whether that be play with your grandkids or go run a marathon, or maybe just hike the Pacific Crest Trail, whatever that happens to be for you. So I think a lot of vitality actually comes down to how does the person sitting in front of me define it for themselves.
Same thing for you, Jim.
Perfect. So I would define vitality as creating and living an amazing life. One of the things that I know is every human being goes through levels of trauma as they grow up. And in the work that I do with people, I get them to understand how we create this experience of life. Because if you think about your life experience, it's created inside of here, it's created in your head. And oftentimes it is based upon the things that have happened to you in the past. And with most of the people that I work with, or really all the people I work with, the minute you understand how you create your reality and the impact that the past has on this created reality, especially the traumas that have occurred to every person at a very young age, then you begin to process life different. And in the past, when you had anxiety and trauma, now you can actually see what was like, how the past impacts your now. You can say no to that impact and you can create an amazing life. And to me, vitality is living your dreams, doing that which you need to, not being in a PTSD spiral or an anxiety spiral. It is really understanding life to the point that you are the master of your fate.
I really like how you said that you are the master of your fate, because I think that a lot of people lose track of that, whether it's politics, all of the things that happen in this world that get people away from that center and that alignment, is the fact that you are the architect of your life, and you can't let all the exterior factors affect you. So, again, like I touched on it briefly, but one thing that Dr. Barnes does that I find fascinating that a lot of people really don't understand or know is fascial counterstrain and, in general, counterstrain. So let's start with the basics. What is fascial counterstrain?
Fascial counterstrain is a way to reduce inflammation through manual therapy. And manual therapy means hands-on, and it's not like massage or rolfing. It's different in a number of ways. So for those who are familiar with rolfing, they know, and they've been on a rolfing table, and they know how painful it is. I've done it myself. I don't think I'll ever do it again. Counterstrain is not painful. It's indirect, as they say. We take the fascial glides in the direction of ease instead of pushing into them to create. That's a very Western way of approaching releasing things, is to push into them. This is a pulling away, and it allows the tissue to relax and to drain inflammation. And when we do that, number one, we download the chemicals that are causing pain signals, in addition to releasing the fascial constriction. Like fascia, that slimy covering that we think of, is actually around every single structure in the body, and it contracts, and if you in the presence of inflammation. So if you, for example, let's use COVID we know creates an inflammatory storm, and some of those things lodge in the heart, those chemicals lodge in the lungs. If we have an adjustment, if you will, that can move the heart or lungs into a position where we can drain the inflammation from those areas, they'll be in less pain and the structures are going to work better. So, how would you feel if the arteries of your heart fed more blood to your heart? How would you feel if your lungs could expand greater and take in more air? The beauty of fascial counterstrain is its specificity in treating very specific things, like not just the arteries of the heart or the lungs or a bone, but also structures deep within the brain, arteries and veins of the brain, different areas of the brain, including the amygdala or the hippocampus, which are implicated in things like post-traumatic stress, treating the auditory areas, treating the balance areas, which, as we know from a physiological standpoint, are really overactive when somebody's hypervigilant from post-traumatic stress. So counterstrain is, again, hands-on. It's non-invasive. Person doesn't take any clothes off. They just take their shoes off, get on the table, and we do this work. And they get to experience something that's not painful and helps them feel better immediately, which is a lot for people to get their heads around, because we think it's supposed to hurt. Healing's supposed to, we're supposed to do work. Well, yeah, I'm the one doing the work. You sit on the table and feel good. That's what it's all about. The woman I work for in Paulsbo over on the Kitsap Peninsula just published a study showing that fascial counterstrain is effective for the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And that bears repeating, that there is a manual therapy. This is the first study of its kind that shows a manual hands-on therapy can help people resolve post-traumatic stress symptoms. The study was done with veterans and first responders and was published in Military Medicine. And I think the fact that it was published in Military Medicine is important because they seem to recognize that this is something that our population needs and it's effective. So let's start telling people about this so we can get the word out about what counterstrain is and who it can help. And it's not just veterans and first responders. That's the group that I like to focus on, but it's important to understand that anybody who's had a chaotic childhood, who has undergone something traumatic, or some event like motor vehicle accidents, like everybody who's come in my office that has a motor vehicle accident has some sort of trauma that is associated with that event. Well, we have something that doesn't involve pharmaceuticals, doesn't you don't have to eat right. So I can't say enough about how amazing something like this can be and what the potential of something like this could be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is according to an AI I just found, and it says fascial counterstrain, or FCS, is a manual therapy showing promise for reducing PTSD symptoms by treating the nervous system's physical responses to trauma. Studies suggest that FCS can decrease sympathetic nervous system overactivity and inflammation, a key factor in PTSD, resulting in rapid improvements in PTSD, depression, anxiety, and somatic symptoms after just a few sessions. And something that you said in a previous interview that we did, and another provider, a hypnotherapist on the platform, echoed this, but you mentioned that we need to stop calling it post-traumatic stress disorder. Because if you're in war, you can't, obviously. And the other thing that she mentioned that I found fascinating, and you just touched on it, is that not all veterans experience PTSD, and more people than just veterans experience PTSD. And that's where I want Jim to come in here, because Jim deals with young men. And a lot of these young men deal with some kind of trauma. Jim, and I hope you don't mind if I bring this up, but Jim was an experienced SA as a child. And I think a lot more men experience SA than they're willing to talk about. And another thing that's fascinating about Jim is when you look at Charlie Kirk, rest in peace. And no matter how you feel about Charlie Kirk, the man who saw him die, Jim knows his son. And Jim helped his son overcome that trauma. And Jim, if you want to speak on that.
Yeah, I'll speak real quick. I have a former client, his brother and the brother-in-law were there when the assassination took place. And that night, I actually did a Zoom session for 7 people in the family to process what they had said. And I love that. I love that redefinition of PTSD, doctor. I really do. And in under 3 hours, we had everything that they had witnessed processed, to where to this day, all 7 of those people do not have PTSD as a result of what 2 brothers and their brother-in-law witnessed. And before I go too much further, I really, Dr. Barnes, thank you, because what if you heard it, she does not offer a pharmaceutical approach. This is what I love about naturopathic doctors, is they go at the body and they solve the problem there. I solve the problem in the mind, because when we understand the mind in conjunction with the healing of the body, what emerges is a whole person. And I'm not sure if I answered your questions fully. You had a few questions in there, but that was the first thing I really, it's like anytime a human being, and it doesn't have to be a soldier or somebody in the military, although I love that you're focusing on that, because all of the work that is being done with the soldiers and the people that have served, all of those solutions that are being created are also there to assist people that are not, they did not go to war. They did not see what those soldiers saw, but yet they still have trauma. And with their trauma, their lives are impacted. And when you can heal physically and when you can heal mentally, it shifts the perspective of how you live life. And once that perspective gets shifted, you shift away from a lot of those anxiety-based behaviors in life, and life becomes quite incredible, which is what we both offer, both the doctor and myself.
Yeah, and to your point, this is again another stat that approximately 14% of veterans reported having a substance abuse or having a substance use disorder in the past year, while other studies suggest higher rates of misuse, with one indicating nearly 20% of returning veterans have a substance abuse problem, and another finding 25% admit to misusing alcohol or prescription drugs. And that's what I love about what Dr. Barnes does, utilizing psychedelic medicine. Because I think that in a lot of cases, and it's not just psychedelic medicine, there's an integration that also occurs, and that I love Jim to speak on. But sticking with psychedelic medicine, I think that that's something that a lot of people, especially with the religious community, especially in the States, they try to call that woo-woo. And the problem is that people are getting healed from this stuff. And instead, they're being thrown pills, which doesn't help them, and instead causes them to misuse, or in a lot of cases, it causes self-deletion as well. So can you speak, Dr. Barnes, on your work with psychedelic medicine, and what success have you seen with the veterans?
Well, I can only talk about my own personal experience with veterans and my own personal experience as a user. I don't shy away from talking about that. I hope that as research continues, that we will see some hard facts, based on the requirements to be published in America, with our Western boundaries, if you will, on what constitutes good research. But I think they're going to show that it's overwhelmingly positive. What's getting in the way is that there's a lot of bias and there's a lot of fear around what these things are and what their potential is. And I don't really have a lot to dissuade people, because it's like, well, what is your fear based on, and have you tried it yet? And if not, perhaps we could stop bashing it until you do actually try it yourself or look at some of the research that's out there. My personal experience is that it's been a mind-blowing part of my recovery back from what I would consider post-traumatic stress. And what we're using now is post-traumatic stress growth. or post-traumatic growth, meaning it's not enough to just heal, but how are you growing after you use these things? And the potential is basically unlimited. I think one of the pitfalls for people is they're constantly in this loop of healing, but there's got to be an end to healing. And that goes into what Jim was talking about, vitality and living your best life. I think psychedelics offer that. Whether you continue using them or not, just using them can help close the door on something that has been traumatic for you and open the door for something like I never imagined that life could be like this. So they're very powerful. I do acknowledge that they're not for everybody and that they do need to be done appropriately. Like having somebody come into your living room on a Saturday night to do a round of shrooms is not the type of work that I do. That's, that's valid if, recreational things are a thing. But the type of work I do and the type of work that a lot of veterans are doing in peer-led stuff or peer-led spaces is all about the appropriate use, the integration. Like, what do you do with those insights after you get them? How do you keep that ball rolling? And then what's not talked about a lot is the community that develops and the connection that develops, because really, I think true healing and then growth happens within the context of, I'm going to use the word tribe, but family, chosen family, as opposed to, blood family, or that group of people that's closest to you that you're allowed to be vulnerable with and lean on when times are hard. That the development of that cocoon, if you will, is very, very important to getting beyond the I need to heal and into the I am now vital and I'm grasping for the best that I can in life. But basically, the experience so far that I have, both personally and professionally, is that these things have amazing potential. They're doing crazy good things, and it's about time that we blow the doors open on researching and making these things accessible. Because when you consider the difference between what is it, like 4,000 U.S. service members have died in Afghanistan and Iraq, and then 240,000 have died by self-selection. Like that ratio is not acceptable. We need to do more for folks that are choosing to die by suicide.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I think the latest statistic I heard was 22 of our veterans or military people commit suicide every day. That is a problem. And one of the things, I'm a huge proponent of psychedelics, but one of the biggest, and I don't know where I was actually on a board of a local psychedelic society that provided information and provided integration circles. And one of the things that we learned is 80+% of the transformation that occurs when you take psychedelics happens in integration. And integration is getting together with a peer group once you've done the psychedelic ceremony and talking about it and talking it through. And the more you integrate and get out of your head with these things and get into community or tribe or however you want to call it, once you get in there, that is where the healing deepens, and that is where you rewire the neurotransmitters in your brain, and you not only become more healthy, but then you live healthier as a result of that. So and I love the example, right? Hey, it's Saturday night. Let's do some shrooms, dude. That does not mean you're going to get healed. But if you do it among peers with a healing intention, right? Set and setting. What is the set that you're doing your psychedelics? And what is the setting? Have you created an intention? Are you sitting with somebody there that is there for the purpose of healing, which is far different from there because we're gonna talk to the trees and we're gonna talk to the grass. And no, it's like you're actually creating an intention to heal yourself. And I'm coming up on 6 years doing these with clients, and I actually have a men's group that for the last 2 years I've gone back to the East Coast, and last year as a group, we just microdosed. We did some, actually, we did a little above. We did a little above a microdose. And it was amazing the impact that it had. And a lot of these men, there were 11 people in the circle. Far majority of them are former military, and some are former law enforcement. And the difference it made was incredible. But we talked after. We had conversation about healing, because that is where your healing really sticks long term. And doctor, any thoughts about that you could add?
I think there are a lot of ways to use these medicines. A lot of the criticism has been that these things are indigenous and they have a history of being used a certain way. I saw an interview with an indigenous elder who was quite upset about the idea of microdosing. And my answer to that would be, I think each culture needs to determine how they're going to use things in a way that best suits that culture. And because Western capitalistic culture is a certain way, then the medicine is only going to come in a certain way, and we're going to use it a certain way. But that said, I've done ceremonies that are all the way from completely off the grid, Ruwu, and then on the other hand, super clinical, and all of them have been effective for me. So
Okay.
I think I would say that it's like, who is the participant and what resonates with their soul on what's going to work for them. And in that way, it keeps the door open for that person to find the right set and setting that's going to work for them. I don't think any of these options should be taken off the table. Going down to Peru and doing something in the jungle might work for somebody and be unbelievably therapeutic and healing, while something super clinical like doing ketamine in a clinic in a group setting might also be very therapeutic, because from a Western mind, maybe that's safer and more approachable and palatable. So I'm open to all the different ways that we could use these things: microdosing, heroic dosing, stacking, whatever that happens to be. And that makes it an individual thing, which is beautiful, because every person heals differently. Every person finds vitality differently. And so let's keep it all on the table.
Yeah, I love that. And I have to tell you that back in 2006 and 2007, it was February 14th. It was Valentine's Day of 2006. I read an article about ayahuasca in the Peruvian jungle. And it so moved me that 3 weeks later, I was on a plane going down there. I've done 20 total ceremonies, or excuse me, 10 total ceremonies, 5 each trip down to Peru. And I will say, for me, and this is just for me, because I do not recommend ayahuasca. People come and say, I want to do ayahuasca. I'm like, no, you don't. You really don't. And we sit down and we talk about it. But in my third ceremony was when I dealt with the sexual assault that happened to me as a child. And it was so profound. The healing was so different that I came back a different human. And for me, it worked. For other, I mean, I just, this was a new place that did it, because I ended up going back 9 months later. But in that first trip, there were only 6 people. And the first night we were in ceremony, about an hour into it, from across the room, one of the people starts yelling about all the pain, and then says that he had just had open heart surgery 3 weeks earlier, and he could not. He says, "This is really hurting my heart." And then you had one other person making sexual gestures and sexual innuendos towards another person in the circle, that the shamans walked over and they just did this thing over him with they gave him an akara, and then they went, hoo, 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 and I don't remember what they said, but then they sat down, and 20 minutes later he was writhing and screaming. And when I got up the next morning, he and his friend were packing up. But for me, it was the perfect thing that I needed to do to heal the trauma inside my heart. And it's what really opened me up, because that December, because in December it will be 20 years. And I had the December before I went down to Peru. That's when I had begun my coaching. But once I had to heal, once I healed my issues up here through ayahuasca, that's when things changed. And it's funny because after that, in the late teens, I was really kind of against psychedelics. I'm not going to lie, but then I had to remember, oh yeah, that's something that you used, and it turned it around, because it is something that people should talk to people that have done it and make sure it's right for you before you just hop on a plane and go down to Peru. And so, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
if I could interject real quick, I think it's also important to remember that if ayahuasca isn't for you, it's not your place to say whether it's right for somebody else or not right for somebody else. And that's some of the kickback that I've gotten from people, is that, well, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, it's not your place to tell me what's right for me.
Well, exactly. Each person has to figure out what's right for your heart and your soul, whether it's ayahuasca, mushrooms, MDMA, ketamine. I mean, personally, I've experienced MDMA once. I think I need to give it another shot because I didn't have the best experience with it. But a lot of people are very pro MDMA, but me, like, I've found that mushrooms are my thing.
And something I found really interesting looking at all the stats, to your point, is that it seems like statistically, versus with trials, MDMA has the most information on it, according to this stat right here. Clinical trials using MDMA assisted psychotherapy for severe PTSD has shown a significant efficacy of up to 71% of participants in phase 3 no longer meeting the diagnostic criteria for PTSD, compared to 32% in the placebo group. And according to AI, but magic mushrooms is still in early stages, but preliminary studies have shown significant potential. See, for me, with my own journey, I've only done mushrooms, and it's helped me significantly.
Where does ketamine fit in there? Because ketamine is the one legal psychedelic that a lot of and doctor, you probably know more about ketamine.
Well, there is a lot of research out there about ketamine. I think one of the important things to remember is that each of these substances has a different strength, meaning we find that ketamine is actually good for people who are in chronic pain. So there's a psychedelic therapy that could be good for somebody who's experiencing physical pain. Some substances are being studied for like substance use disorder. Iboga, which we haven't talked about yet, which is a very interesting, and I've done that myself, like talk about something that's not addictive. Oh yeah, I've done it twice. But that's being studied for things like dopamine related diseases like Parkinson's and opioid addiction. So, and mushrooms are not being studied for opioid addiction. It's important to recognize that there are different things that these medicines do well. And as the research starts to blossom, and it'll pick up, like I don't think it's going anywhere this time. We're going to find that different things are good for this sounds so scientific. Different things are good for different things. But whether something is effective for a thing is going to be dependent on what it is. So, mushrooms may be good for depression or alcohol use disorder, whereas especially the veterans like the artillery guys and the naval aviators that I know that have had damage to their brains from pulling G's, maybe something like ibogaine is the medicine of choice. I don't know how much research out there is on ayahuasca. I've done some searches and there is some, but anyway, there's much to be learned. And I think what we need to do is check back in a year and 5 years, and we're going to see a vastly different field of what's available in terms of clinical knowledge and then just cultural knowledge.
Yeah, 100%. And that's part of why we made this platform, because at the end of the day, people are going to do what they're going to do. They're going to try these things. But the more information that we have, the more people can make sound decisions. So I want to transition a little bit, because as a veteran, it's one of the few things in the U.S. where there really isn't anything that you can compare it to, right? Whether you're black, you're white, you're Spanish, you're gay. If you're a veteran, you're a veteran. And it's a knit community of brotherhood. But one thing I'm finding and looking at the stats is that the Black community specifically, they tend to stray away from psychedelic medicine. However, they tend to utilize marijuana in the same vein. And Jim has spoken on this before, that the reason why they call it dope is that you are doping out and you're numbing yourself. So you're utilizing it as a medication for the symptoms that you have. And not everyone of color deals with PTSD, obviously, but a lot do and tend to go towards that route versus psychedelic medicine, ketamine, magic mushrooms, ibogaine, bufo. Any of those things are not typically associated with the Black community. So my question is, why do you think that's the case? And how do you think that community specifically can overcome PTSD instead of numbing themselves with, marijuana?
From my perspective, it could be a cultural thing. What did you grow up with? What is acceptable in your culture? What did you see as a kid people doing as you grow up? I think there is an additional, and this is opinion only, right? This share opinions. I suspect that the part of the problem might be the reticence of African American community to trust in the conventional medical system, which is where a lot of this is happening. You're doing clinical, Harvard or Johns Hopkins are doing research studies on psilocybin for whatever, and if you have grown up in a time and a place where people of color have been experimented on without their permission, and there's that trauma associated with trusting the conventional medical system, perhaps that might be a barrier to why more people aren't choosing it. I don't know. And the other question would be looking at the demographics of the veterans that select for things like special forces, because a lot of this is happening within the special force community. And in my community is a naval aviator community. Unfortunately, there are very, very few at least at the time I was serving, I don't know what it's like now, but there were very, very few African Americans and people of color and women, right? So the question would be, well, is it a numbers thing or is it a cultural thing? And perhaps it's a little bit of both. I don't know, but I would love to know the answer to that myself, because that is a group that I would be interesting to see what the trauma rates are for the average white person as compared to the average colored person, and especially with what's going on in our country today, and just see where that might be a research topic worth a study all of its own, is to see why those folks aren't seeking this out more.
And that was a great point you made, looking at the statistics. And that's why I love what Jim said, that with the difference between naturopathic medicine and traditional medicine is that traditional medicine does have that history, but naturopathic medicine doesn't. It's alternative. So I think that they need to break the stigma. And it's not a race thing, like Jim mentioned. It really is, an everyone thing. There is a massive distrust in the medical system on a granular scale, no matter what the race is, because of a myriad of factors, COVID being one of them. And looking at the statistics, to your point, there is a higher level of distrust because of as you mentioned, the Tuskegee syphilis studies, systemic racism and discrimination in healthcare. And I think that this is a great watershed moment for the African American community to shift towards holistic medicine that doesn't care about your race, that doesn't care about any of that, and only is looking at ways that you can heal yourself. Because I think that's the biggest thing about all of this that people need to realize is that your body has an immense regenerative potential to heal itself. And both Dr. Barnes and Jim Pehkonen are trying to get you to realize that utilizing these medicines, you can heal yourself and, as Jim mentioned, live an amazing life. So, Jim, any thoughts on that?
I would agree. I think at the end of the day, we are all looking for ways that we can heal. And I think we're looking for ways that we can heal without going to a pharmaceutical pill that we're going to get addicted to for our entire life. If you think about it, a lot of our past, the past generations, they didn't have to take pills every morning. They created life. I mean, even if you take a look at the generation, when I was growing up, we had to deal with boredom. These days, we have these little things right here that assist us to get addicted at a very young age to screens and screen time. And I think one of the things that alternative ways of looking at the health, whether it's with a naturopathic doctor or with a life architect, is between us. You're healing the body, you're healing the mind. And when you can shift your mindset, and then with all of the trauma that's happened, and let's say that you find that perfect psychedelic for you and it works, it's going to open up a life experience that you cannot imagine. And as that life experience opens up, you're going to want to give that to your neighbors, your friends, the people that you served with, right? Because what if we handled things differently and it wasn't just turning to a pill to numb us out, that we actually did things such that we create and live like this one wonderful life that we have.
And I love how you said that it's about not numbing yourself. And I think that's the thing that people need to realize. And I love what you guys mentioned about the integration part. That psychedelic medicine is not about numbing yourself in the same way that traditional drugs are about numbing yourself. It's about getting into out of your head, into the body, healing that, and then speaking about it. And I think that's the biggest thing. And Jim, if you want to speak more about that, is getting out of your head. Because I think in a lot of cases, people are stuck in their head, whether it's negative self-talk, whether it's, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, it's stuck here. And when we get out of this, get into our bodies, that's when we can really heal. And I love how you mentioned that what it really comes down to, and what naturopathic and alternative medicine does, is it helps to facilitate emotional regulation, reduce hyperarousal, and provide the nonverbal ways to process trauma. So,
yeah.
And we
I mean, I'm going to share a personal story around that. My first wife, who is an amazing woman, suffered from severe depression. And I didn't have the transformational tools that I developed after we parted. But there was a time in our marriage that she got off of all of her medications. And I didn't know how to support her. She's an incredible human. She could not find, she finally did find a therapist that supported her. But literally, she was either 100% up or 100% down. And one of the comments that she told me is that she was so tired of being numb. And I think had I had the knowledge that I have now, we would probably still be together, because she really was an incredible woman. But when she got off everything, she got violent, and it got to the point that, I could not, at that time, I couldn't handle it. And I was also at the time, can you get rid of all that crap on the bottom? You keep putting notes up and they're just distracting. Thank you. Thanks. But it got to a point I didn't know how to handle it. And what I've learned, whether it's around psychedelic medication, whether it's around a naturopath, because there was a number of years after we parted, I did see a Chinese medical doctor and a naturopath, because that's when I was in my healing. And now I do my coaching because it took me 15 to 20 years to heal. And I do it because it shouldn't take anybody 15 to 20 years to heal. Like, I really, in my heart of hearts, living naturally and living our best life and learning how to deal with the trauma in such a way that we just life, like my life is incredible. And I'll share a second quick story. And then if Dr. Barnes has anything to add to this, it was about 4.5 months ago, I had a near-death experience. I got crushed, right? I ended up with 5 broken ribs, and a braided lung, a broken spine. I had to have emergency surgery to put a stent in a femoral artery. And as I was crushed and hanging there for under 10 minutes, I thought I was going to die. And one of the things that I had was an incredible amount of peace. So had I died then, I was at peace. I have no regrets in life. I can't say that's where I was 20 or 30 years ago, but it is where I am now. And that's the power of healing, both on a physical level and on a mental level. And that's what alternative methods of healing give us. Because just as Dr. Barnes said, just because it worked for me doesn't mean it'll work for you, the listener. Sometimes we have to explore different ways. It's just like my acupuncturist. I finally found an acupuncturist who does acupuncture and cupping that really assists with the pain associated with broken ribs and a broken spine and the healing that I had to go through. And it works for me. But if you're listening to this, number one, come to the summit. Because at the summit, you're going to hear all different types of healers. And number two, find your path. Because your healing path, it is custom for you. But understand that, like, through DecentMed, you have all these people that you can see who can assist you to really be the best you can be. Doctor, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, we could do a whole nother talk with the three of us on the accessibility of alternative therapies, which is part of the challenge. And maybe we'll talk about some of that when we're in the summit. But people who are disabled or have limited resources, like, well, how can I pay for this? And that's a challenge. We don't have enough time to talk about the rest of that, but I want to at least acknowledge that it's out there, because the conventional system, even if you have insurance, which I consider a smokescreen, isn't necessarily going to cover some of these things. My second point is, for those who are struggling and they're on mood medications, SSRIs, SNRIs, benzos, whatever that happens to be, what we're not doing is judging you for taking those things, because we understand that in a lot of cases those medications are stabilizing, and if we can stabilize you, we can at least work towards getting you exercise and getting you nutrition and doing all the diet and lifestyle things that are important for being healthy on planet Earth. At some point, though, it would be ideal to taper down those things, and that's a long-term plan. So having some patience with where you are. Well, I'm on a medication, and I can't do these things. Okay, let's meet you there and see where we can go. And then understanding that the process is, and maybe some healing is slow for a reason, because maybe if we heal too fast, that's too sudden. I don't know, but the healing path that I've taken has been long. And and it's required patience. So just acknowledge, like Jim said, if you're listening to this, just acknowledge where you are and be okay with that. And then just understand that, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm okay with that, but here's where I want to go. And if I'm going to use alternative therapies, how can I get there?
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Yeah, and it's funny because I get new clients and they're like, do I get off all my meds? And I'm like, absolutely not. Because people being on your meds, that's what has you find Dr. Barnes, has you find myself, has you find, even the DecentMed website. So it's like work to understand it is a process to get off the pharmaceuticals and get back. It really is. And sometimes, pharmaceuticals are not bad things per se, because there are some people I know that still, I have one client that still every now and then she has to take, when things get really stressful, she takes something for a few weeks and it helps her get through that. So it's like they're not, I'm not here. I don't think we're here to demonize it. My issue is people that are on a lifetime, and you're feeling numb and you're not experiencing the incredible experience of life, because life really is incredible, even in these troubled times.
I love that. And that's a great point, is that and even in the psychedelic world, if you're having to do 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 ayahuasca trips, well, then there's a problem and you're not doing the integration part. So to Jim's point, and if you want to correct me if I'm wrong on that, but
I'm just be cautious. Like if somebody needs to do 20 ayahuasca ceremonies and they are doing integration, that's perfect for them. If somebody is doing MDMA and then they move to ketamine and then they try mushrooms and then they go do ayahuasca and then they go back to mushrooms, understand, as long as you're doing the integration work on the other side of your ceremonies, because talk is powerful.
So, but to that point, what if they are just doing it, like with the case of marijuana, to numb? I think that's the difference.
Yeah, it's the human race. Like no matter what substance out there, somebody is going to abuse it, right? People abuse alcohol all the time. People experiment. Maybe that's part of being a free human on planet Earth, is you can do whatever you want and have whatever experience you want on planet Earth. But don't let that take away from the folks who are doing things with the intention of healing. Like marijuana is a highly potent medicinal herb. And when used appropriately, ceremonially, all the things, it can be very, very potent healer. And that said, if somebody wants to smoke it and get high on their couch on a Saturday, all the more power to them. So that's the spectrum of the human experience. What we're saying from a perspective of alternative healers is there's this thing, and it has the potential to help you heal if you're interested in doing it.
Yep.
I love that.
Okay.
Yep. So, I love that too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
That was very eloquent. And just want to close. This is our upcoming summit. We have a second day also on the 13th. Jim and Dr. Barnes will be speaking. If you guys want to close or talk about the summit or what you guys are going to talk about, you have the floor.
Go ahead, doctor, and then I'll wrap it up after you.
I think what I'm going to do is share a little bit about each of the modalities that I do and how they can help. Because one thing I wasn't able to talk about in this is NSI, which is neurosomatic intelligence. And neurosomatic intelligence is all about applied neurology to retrain your nervous system for safety, which if you're not into psychedelics, which, good on you for knowing that, there are other modalities. And I love that you have hypnotherapy. I've done hypnotherapy myself. Like, tune into that. If you're going to watch the summit, tune into that, because hypnotherapy can be just as powerful at accessing some of the subconscious. But I look forward to doing a little bit of a deeper dive for the summit and sharing some of the modalities that I do. And if anyone has questions or they have things that we'd want to answer, I would welcome that feedback in preparation for the summit.
Yes, beautiful. And I look forward, if you're listening or watching this, join the summit. take a step into exploring all these different alternative ways to heal. I'll be speaking about the mind, and I'll be speaking to how we create this experience called life and the impact of traumas. But I look forward to sharing more, and I love interactions like this. So, Dr. Barnes, thank you. DecentMed, thank you. And for all of you listening, thank you. Really look forward to assisting you to find your path for healing.
And make sure to subscribe to both their YouTube channels, the youtube.com/@alternativeflightplan and youtube.com/@AmazingLifeDesign. You can also visit their websites at AmazingLifeDesign.com for Jim and MeridianPassageWellness.com for Dr. Barnes. Thank you so much for joining us today. And this has been the latest episode of DecentMed Spotlight featuring Jim Pehkonen and Dr. Kristin Barnes.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.